The election appears to be over, and I think we've had enough of the political attacks, not that they're going to end, but I wanted to take a look at how a Trump-Musk administration will impact the US auto industry. Sorry, JD. I want to do this by looking at some of the key policy questions and forecasting what I think are the likely outcomes. You may disagree with my takes, you may hate what I have to say, so feel free to share your comments. At the very end of this video, I'll focus on the outlook of the Detroit 2.5, the companies in my neighborhood. And for one of them in particular, I think they may face bankruptcy. It may surprise you who I think that is. What happens to climate change? There's 100% certainty that climate change will keep on rolling on. I wish it were a hoax, but sadly, it's the truth, an inconvenient truth. With Elon Musk in the White House, surely climate action will become a priority under this Trump reboot. I mean, after all, Elon Musk called climate change the biggest threat that humanity faces this century. But, that was like 6 years ago when he was selling electric vehicles. Now he's running an AI and robotics company. Chances that the US pulls back out of the Paris Climate Agreement, it's like 99% on day one. Now, you may recall that Musk left the Trump administration council after the US withdrew from the first time. So what's the difference now? Musk is smart. I don't see how you can argue otherwise. I mean, he is a smart guy, and he's willing to give Trump the satisfaction of sticking it to the environmentalists for the sake of his other priorities. That's a depressing start. So what happens to our $7,500 EV tax credit? Actually, I think there's a slightly better than 50% chance they stay. It's easier to ignore them than to take action to repeal or, dare I say, replace them. And Tesla benefits from this incentive, so Elon likes. Now, for the remainder of 2024, I fully expect Elon to hint that they're going away. Why? Because that would help drive Q4 sales so that he can show sales growth year over year. Get your Tesla now before prices go up next year. Then when next year rolls around, the tax credits magically remain. They could get reinterpreted by a new head of the IRS or reinterpreting the critical mineral requirements for those incentives. Regardless, I think there's a pretty good chance they stay. Elon says a lot of stuff and guesses that Tesla sales will rise 20 to 30% next year. No way he can achieve that without some help. The bipartisan infrastructure law has already awarded billions of US dollars to corporations who manufacture batteries, components, processes, and mines materials in the US. That money has already been committed, so there is a chance they withhold any new projects from getting money. And that may not be the end of EVs in America. The various operations need years to get established and ramp up production. Growth of EV sales has cooled off in the US, but it's still growing, just not as fast as they were projected 2 years ago. So there's a chance that new funding gets cut off, but not rescinding already approved projects. Tesla, for one, has benefited from these government handouts. These government incentives and investments, and so have red states. So the pro-business thing to do would just to keep spending taxpayers' dollars for these corporations to build plants in the US. What happens to CARB, the California Air Resources Board, and their more strict emission requirements, and the other states that joined on? 90%, I think they're gone. I give a 10% chance that they're able to fight this in the courts. Maybe it drags on for a few years. If it ultimately goes to the Supreme Court, you know how that will end. But there are other paths that states can take to make buying a new combustion engine vehicle less likely, like raising the sales tax or registration costs for non-EVs. Hell, go back to the carbon credits. There could be an agreement that gas-powered vehicles can still be sold in those states, but the OEM must pay a carbon tax or, better yet, buy credits from an EV manufacturer. I was never a big fan of banning combustion engine vehicles in the first place. I prefer raising taxes or a carbon tax. I also don't like gas taxes because that hurts less affluent owners who are stuck with their 2010 gas-powered SUV. I don't think the federal government can stop states from using taxes or registration fees to affect consumer behavior. I mean, look at what happened with cigarettes. They just kept raising the tax until people decided to quit or die. Let's talk geopolitics. What's going to happen to Biden's 100% tariff on Chinese EVs? In my opinion, it stays, with an asterisk. I believe they allow companies to file for an exemption. Who, might you ask? Yeah, it would not surprise me at all to see a few thousand Chinese-made Model 3s or Model Ys shift from Giga Shanghai into the US exempt and free. Most buyers wouldn't even notice. Polestar could use some help in this area too. They have a plant in the red state of South Carolina, so they could use that as justification to eliminate the 100% add-on to their vehicles. Lincoln also wants to profitably import from China. So, okay, it's all about perception. Tough on China while leaving plenty of loopholes for the right people. As for allowing Chinese brand vehicles to be assembled in the US, Tesla doesn't want the competition of, let's say, BYD, but Trump loves to make deals, even if it stabs Detroit in the back. I'll say there's a 30% chance an EV manufacturer signs a deal in the next 4 years to assemble in the US, and more like a 70% chance that they open a plant in Mexico, but are barred from importing those vehicles into the US. Similar story for the Biden proposed ban on Chinese autonomous vehicles and connected vehicle technology. Now, this can apply to any vehicle, gas-powered or electric. With this, I think the core element stays in place. Chinese autonomous vehicles will not be allowed in the US. There's just too much national security at stake, and both sides of Congress are concerned about this. Plus, the last thing Vice President Musk would want is more competition. He already hates the comparison to Waymo. The last thing he would want is Baidu or Pony AI to hit our roads. Like with the tariffs, companies could ask for an exemption. Tesla, for example, could say that their technology was developed in the US, so they can promise that any Chinese-made vehicles they might want to import in would be completely safe for US roads, including driving around government facilities. What Musk really wants is a national standard for autonomous vehicles, one that would let him deploy unsupervised full self-driving without the red tape from various states. That sounds like something Congress would have to do. I don't believe a presidential order can accomplish that, nor can NHTSA just make up their own rules separate from Congress. Remember the Chevron deference that was overturned by the Supreme Court? It makes it very unlikely that NHTSA could do this by its own. So what does all this mean for the US auto industry? I'm going to break this into parts. Over the next 4 years, traditional automakers will scale back their investments into new EVs and other fuel economy technologies, allowing more profits to hit that bottom line. Not a wholesale cancellation of everything, but challenging their past decisions. I expected interest rates to come down regardless of who won the White House, but maybe they come down faster now with pressure from the new administration or a flat-out replacement of Chairman Powell. Tesla will keep trading like a meme stock. It's up big after the election, but how will investors feel about Elon paying even less attention to the decisions within the car company? EV-only startups like Rivian and Lucid, they have a rough road ahead. People will keep buying electric vehicles even if the tax credits go away, but the expectations for those companies have to be less. Long-term, 2028 is where I get worried for my hometown. Japanese, German luxury, and Korean companies, they'll be fine. They compete around the world and have a diverse product lineup that can succeed in the US and everywhere else. I feel strongly that by 2030, Toyota is going to be one of the top manufacturers of battery electric vehicles. They're going to catch up. New electric vehicle sales will not stop growing, particularly in China. PHEVs and BEVs will continue to grow in Europe. EV adoption is taking hold in markets all over the world and in some surprising places. Tesla, it should go without mentioning, they're going to be fine. And then we get to the Detroit companies. Stellantis is guaranteed to struggle over the next 2 years. The Auburn Hills headquarters, yeah, it's likely to get sold off or scaled back. They just don't have the products in their lineup. They were gearing up for a slew of battery EVs. By 2030, they'll be just Ram pickups and mid to large Jeeps in the US. They lose money on everything else, so they'll just keep cutting back their lineup back to what's profitable. General Motors, this may surprise you. I think they compete. Their electric vehicles, don't call them Ultium, are bringing in new customers to the brand that were once dead on the east and west coasts of the US. Large pickups and SUVs will keep printing money. Outside of the US, they have next to nothing in Europe and will continue that way. South America, yeah, fine. And they'll continue to struggle in China, eventually finding a satisfactory bottom position in the market. Things will never be the same for them there, but the lessons they learn on PHEVs and battery EVs combined with big pickup trucks and SUVs will make them a healthy company. So that leaves Ford. Yeah, I'm down on Ford. Here's why. They went for first mover advantage with the Lightning and Mach-E. Cool. Like the results of those, and they expanded production capacity. Mistake. Made big plans with multiple battery plants and platforms. All that got rebooted a couple of months ago. Check out my summary on that announcement. I see Ford going through the same crisis that Stellantis North America is currently experiencing. In the US, hey, they still have Ford Pro trucks, large gas-powered SUVs, Bronco and Mustang. Anything else, they cut away, seeking to maximize profitability. Lincoln, most likely gone. They go through the same struggle GM had with Opel Vauxhall in Europe, restructuring until it's just not worth staying in Europe anymore. They delay or maybe even just write off the T3 electric truck platform. That's a whole lot of restructuring and write-offs. It would make more sense for them to do what GM and Chrysler did over 15 years ago, restructure under bankruptcy. So yeah, tell me what you think. The Motor City becomes the large pickup and large SUV city. They make lots of money on those products and become largely irrelevant anywhere else in the world. Elon makes tons of money on AI and robotics, leaves climate change for others to deal with, and the rest of the world continues down the path towards electric mobility, regardless of who lives in the White House. Let me know your thoughts. I don't see this as the end to electric vehicles, but I don't see this being good for Detroit in the long term.